So it's 30 years and 30 days because 2022, our year that we're in, marks the 30-year anniversary that Sean Gallagher purchased the original Pilates studio business and the Joe's Archives. So I had the idea to do a special event for him to honor his work that he's in his contributions that he's made to the Pilates community over those 30 years. So what we're going to be doing over the next 30 days is highlighting a different element of his work over the last 30 years each day. We have different topics that we're going to be covering each day. And we also have some special guest teachers that will be joining us for interviews. And we will be announcing the day before each day as to what our topic is going to be and who our guests will be for the day. Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Not yet.
You're good?
I'm
okay.
Good.
How about you, Cathy?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. So I'll just introduce myself, and then Cathy will introduce herself, and Sean will introduce, and then we'll get started with today's topic. So I'm Elaine Ewing, and this is my studio. I'm in Rhinebeck Pilates. I live in Red Hook, New York, but that's next to Rhinebeck where my studio is. And I'm a Pilates teacher. So I have my Instagram page is Elaine_Ewing. That's my Instagram page. And now I'm here on the Pilates Source doing our event. Okay. Would you like to go?
Yay.
Cathy's going to go.
Okay.
I'm next, yeah.
Okay.
I'm Cathy Strack. Sometimes on Facebook it's Cathy Barker Strack. And I discovered Pilates through a YMCA mat class over 20 years ago as a personal trainer and just never looked back. I'm all in on Pilates. I do teach and have by default become a Pilates historian. Elaine, you should have said you were a Pilates historian as well. We're co-historians. So I divide my time between teaching and working on my books. This is my office. You can see some of my posters behind me for inspiration. And yeah, that's about it for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm Sean Gallagher. I've been doing Pilates and working with Pilates and everything for more than 30 years. I bought the business 30 years ago, but I was exposed to it even before that. My first experience was probably six years before that, but I think you guys are going to ask me questions, so that's what we're doing tonight's talking about.
Yeah.
I'll leave that for later. I'm a physical therapist. I was a dancer. I got a degree in dance and physical therapy at the same time. And I have a master's in nutrition, and I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner. I've studied yoga in India with BSI Iyengar. I've done a lot of different things, but my main focus is, in a lot of stuff, is my PT and my Pilates. And my PT has mostly been Broadway. I've worked on Broadway since 1987. I've worked on 188 shows so far. I'm hoping to make 200 before I retire.
That's a good goal.
Yeah.
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 Cool.
So that's me, and then you're going to ask me questions, and I'll fill in a little bit of the details.
Okay. So I will start the discussion, and then Cathy and I will both be leading the discussion with Sean today. Ongoing, Cathy and I will take turns each night. We'll be talking to Sean and talking to our guests, and we'll be taking turns with it. But tonight, the three of us are going to be together, okay, to welcome everybody. So yeah. Today's topic is going back to 1986 when Sean first started Pilates, and we're going to talk to him about how he got started and his teacher Romana and his impressions and his experience at that point in time. Okay, so were you going to say something? Oh,
waiting for you.
Okay. My first question for you, Sean, is can you give us a picture of your life and times in 1986? Where were you? What were you doing? And where were you going with your life at the time?
Right. Well, before I answer that,
yeah.
Let me just say thank you. Thank you, Cathy. I really appreciate you guys taking the time, the energy, and effort, and really putting this together as historians and trying to get the history, the accurate history of what happened on my, because there are two sides, to that history. What I did, in 1986, I was dancing. I was a modern dancer in Philadelphia. I worked and was a semi-professional. I didn't work full-time as a dancer, but I worked probably 30 hours a week, 20 to 30 hours a week, made hardly any money. And I was also, so I was getting my degree in dance and physical therapy. I started the PT program in 1984. I had my prerequisites and you had to do all that stuff. So I was dancing, 1 week I would dance and the next week I would study for PT and then I would have my performances. So I was going back and forth and shuffling all that all the time and doing a lot of work. And my mother had a friend that was in New York, and he was on Bank Street, right off the West Side Highway, which was right next door to where Merce Cunningham's studio was. So, he would allow me to come up and, spend the weekend at his apartment, and I would go next door and take class, all the time. And so that's sort of, what I was doing. And during that time, I went into physical therapy to work with dancers, to take care of dancers. In 1985, or no, in 1983, my girlfriend, who was a dancer, had a stroke, and she died a couple days after that stroke. And it was during that time that I wanted to, when I saw what was happening in the hospital and all that stuff, and it made me decide that that was something I wanted to do, is to try to help dancers, on all different levels. And so she was at Temple University Hospital, and right next door to the hospital is where the Allied Health program was. So I went into the PT department, and the PT, you're supposed to do this whole process, and I just walked in and was like, can I do this? And I was lucky because the director of the program, his daughter was an ice skater. So he was willing, he said, oh, come on back, I'll talk to you. And, I told him what I was doing and what I did, and he said, well, I hate to tell you this, but everything you've done doesn't do anything for a physical therapy school. All your dance, work and everything else has nothing to do. You have to do all these sciences. So he told me what I had to do, and I went and did it. And, so then I was, I got into PT school and started to work, and he said I was going to be the dance guru guy because, nobody was doing dance medicine then. So that's what happened. And then, I started to go to the city, and I found out a friend of my mother's friend gave me an article from GQ magazine. And it was an article about an exercise system that dancers use to stay in shape and prevent injuries. So obviously I was like, well, that's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. So I went and that's what I looked at. And that's sort of how I first got my first exposure to Pilates, was being able to see that article and go, this is, I want to check this out. I didn't do it right away, but I wanted to check it out. So that's how I first got into Pilates.
So how did you find a Pilates studio or a Pilates person to take that first lesson?
Well, what happened, the article, says where, it was about Romana, right?
Okay.
About the Pilates. It was about the Pilates, it was talking about Pilates, but it was an article written, by the Pilates studio. Now, since I've gotten the archives, Romana did a lot of, Joe did a lot, and Romana, everybody that ran a Pilates studio did a lot and got a lot of written and things out there. I had never been exposed to it because, in Philadelphia, there was no Pilates studios, there was nothing there. So I didn't know about it. And it wasn't until I got to New York, and that article it was old. So it wasn't even, like that month or whatever it was.
Oh, so where did you end up going then?
Well, then I went, the first thing I did is, I found it, I went to the Pilates studio, I had one session. And when I had that one session, I got off that apparatus, like, wow, this stuff is amazing, right? And at some point I'm going to want to do something with that. And then, so here's the backstory. So when I was at Temple in the dance program, Lori Coleman, who was also a Pilates teacher, she was a student there, and we dated. And we were dating. Mm-hmm. And she didn't like Temple because Temple was, she was wanted to be more of a ballerina, or stronger, technique. And Temple was very modern, it was the contemporary ballet, it wasn't the classical, right? Mm-hmm. So, and she wanted to be more classical, basically. So she was, and she also, I guess she just wasn't really happy. So she transferred to SUNY Purchase. And so when she was there, we were still talking and sort of dating. And then she met Steve Giordano, who was running the Pilates studio at SUNY Purchase at the time. So, and we're going to talk more about, some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I won't get into all that now, but so that's what happened. And then she was like, well, Steve can teach you. And it was much cheaper to go to SUNY Purchase and study with Steve than it was to go into the city. And I was a student, and I was a dancer. I mean, as a when I graduated PT school, the first year I worked as a PT, I made 8 times as much money in the first year than I did any year I did dancing. So, I didn't have a lot of money. So, it's like I had to go where it was, where it was cheap and easy to go. So I started to go up and visit her, and she was dating Steve, and we became friends, and he started teaching me, and I started training with Steve. So Steve was really I took a session with him on it, but Steve was my really first main teacher. And
okay.
he and I, and we'll talk about this later as well. He and I went into business together later on, but that's how I got started. Is working, studying at SUNY Purchase and doing all the work there.
Wow, that's cool. So do you remember the studio, like when you did your first session with Romana? Like, do you have any memories of being there and what the studio was like? And...
Well, I went in and I saw reformers. It was like one time it was, 30 years ago, or 30 years. So unlike some people, I don't, my memory is, I don't try to make it up. I remember very little. I remember I saw the reformers, I saw the studio, but I don't remember much. I remember a lot more about SUNY Purchase because not only did I study there and train there, but I ended up, taking over and running that studio for a while later on as well. So
Okay.
I can talk about that if you want. But
what was it like when you went into SUNY Purchase, the studio itself? Like, what was it like there?
Well, SUNY Purchase, if you look at the pictures, the buildings were very stark on the outside. They were just like
institutional.
Brick, institutional, not a lot of windows, and and they weren't that to me. That maybe some people thought it was pretty. I was like, oh. But when you went inside, the dance program had these amazing studios. So they, the person who started the dance program at SUNY Purchase wanted the best for dancers, and that's one of the reasons why there was a Pilates studio there in the first place, because he brought Romana in. But I have the receipts for the equipment that they bought for that, but from Gratz and stuff. So we'll talk about that later too.
Mm-hmm.
But they brought that in, and they had 2 big rooms. Probably as big as Elaine's studio, they had that twice. And one room was for mat only, and the other room was for the apparatus. But the mat room had the wall units. And the wall units, most people don't realize this, but wall units were not invented by Joe. They were put in, they started at SUNY Purchase because Romana had to teach group classes. And so when she had to add things because she couldn't just teach mat, right? Because how long does the mat take? 34 and 34, right? Mm-hmm. So it's, maybe 35, 40 minutes tops for the mat, and she had an hour and 15-minute class. So she had to do other things. So that, when I got there, and it might have been different when they first started, but when I got there was wall units, in the room, and she took basically all the stuff that you can do on the Cadillac with the push-through bar and the leg springs and all those arm springs and things like that, and made a wall unit so that you could still do all the same exercises, and there were raised mats. So you had the raised mats, and you had that was one room, and then in the other room, there was, Carol's on here, she can answer for sure. I'm pretty sure there was 3 or maybe 4 reformers. And then there was a guillotine, there was different, and then they had the other apparatus, the high chair, the wonder chair, so we had a lot of that equipment there. And, Carol's on here, and we're going to talk with her later, and she also, was the main teacher at the Pilates studio at the SUNY Purchase when I was running.
Yeah.
Is that stuff still there?
Last I heard, so Carol says 4. I thought it was 4, but I couldn't remember it was 3 or 4. So, last I heard it was still there.
Wow.
They bought it. It was theirs. I ran the studio, and I'll talk about that because there was, well, let me put it this way. When Steve ran it, what happened was Romana ran the studio and started it, but then the budget ran out and they couldn't do it. So they kind of closed it for, I think they closed it for a while, or they wasn't using it. And what Steve did is he made it into a student,
It's like a club.
a student club. And they
Okay.
paid money, and it was little and this and that, and then he could see outside people. And, he finagled it so that he could open it up again and start teaching, and the students could get it, and he could also make some money and stuff like that. And then what happened is when he stopped being a student, he couldn't run it anymore because it was a student club. And that's when, by that time, that's when I, had bought the trademark and was, looking to do that. And I had been working as the physical therapist at SUNY Purchase, in the dance department. I was taking care of the dancers. So I talked to the director, Carol, what's Carol's last name? Can't remember it right now, but she was the, head of the dance department, and when we worked it out so that I could open that studio again. And what I did is I made it so that the students and the faculty could get a really cheap rate to work out, and then we could open it up to the public so that it would work both ways.
So when you were taking lessons there, Romana was also teaching there?
No, by that time it was just Steve.
But she eventually did? Or?
No, she did it before.
She did it before.
She did it before.
Okay.
So she started it. She put the program together, and then she started doing it. And then she left, and Steve was running it, and they didn't have the money, because, it's not easy to get. If you're coming from New York and you don't have a car, Romana didn't drive, right? So you'd have to take the train, then you have to get a cab, and it was, and even going there driving, it was a lot of traffic time and everything else. So I would go up, and what I would do is I would do the PT for certain hours, and then Carol, I hired Carol to do to teach the Pilates there. So that's sort of how that sort of came about, and that was one of the first places we did the certification as well, certification program. And we're going to talk to one of the teachers that was there, and we did the certification program. We were able to do it during the break, right? So people could come. And there was at least one lateral bow electric chair, guillotine. So I think this is what Joe's saying is what's there now.
Yeah.
Because, there's been other people taking it over since I did it. But so we were.
But during the semester break, you could.
The winter break, there was we could get the housing so they could stay in the dorm.
Okay.
And it made it, it worked out really well because that was an ability to do that. And we paid. They had to pay for that. And, but it was affordable.
Wow.
Student housing, so it was good.
That's cool. I like how it was so integrated into like the lifestyle of college students, because it's so hard for college students. Well, I know it's a dance program, but in general, I think it's a challenge for them to be able to do Pilates in general. And
Well, one of the students, Maria, who we're going to interview, she was one of the students who did the training, and she helped out at the studio as well. So, we worked, it was working to get as many people interested in and working together and helping out, and it was to help the students and also have a studio.
Yeah.
And keep it going.
Cool. So now when you were going there for lessons, did you live in Philadelphia or?
No, by that time I was in, well, yes, in the beginning, when I first went, I would go up on weekends.
Oh, okay.
Because what would happen is, and then in 86, 86 is when I graduated PT school, the summer, right? And my first thing I did, my first job was the Pennsylvania Milwaukee Ballet as the physical therapist. But on the weekends when I was available, I would come up to New York. I had somebody who I could rent their apartment for the weekend.
Wow.
So I would stay in their apartment, and then I would work at New York City Ballet, but then I would also go up to Purchase, so I was.
You're very busy.
I was all over the place.
Yeah.
But
sounds familiar.
I was under, I was 28, so when at that age, I had a lot of energy. I was ready to do anything. I commute to Philadelphia once a week and from New York, and I did all sorts of things that I'm like, I'm not going to do that.
Can we back up just a little bit? What was it though about Pilates in your body or your physical experience that reinforced, this is something that I want to pursue. This is something important.
Well, I was learning, right? I'm a dancer. I had a class on somatics. There was no Pilates, but there's like Feldenkrais and different things and movement and understanding the body. And I was dancing, and dancers spend decades usually training their bodies to get flexible and strong. That's why when dancers come to Pilates, they can usually do things really
Mhm.
quickly because they've done that. They've done training different,
Mhm.
but still training to change the body. And I was doing that, and then when I got into PT school, I was learning Cybex and Nautilus and free weights and all these other things for physical therapy exercises, which were based mostly on single muscle or muscle group exercises. Because, I have 30 years ago, well, 36 years ago, 36 years ago in PT school, it's not a lot different than today. Back then, if you had a shoulder problem, you looked at the shoulder. If you had an elbow problem, you looked at the elbow. You didn't really look at the whole system. Now, because of Pilates and Feldenkrais and other things, yoga and
Yeah.
everything else, that influence has permeated into physical therapy. So now they're getting a bigger gestalt, and they're looking at the whole system. But back then, it was wasn't so comprehensive. So it was really, and a lot of the exercises were based on that. I mean, even in physical therapy today, we have, like to get insurance, I have to do a muscle test. But muscle test was developed for polio. So why am I doing a test that was developed to evaluate a neurological disease for normal people? But that's the way insurance works. So, but the exercises were a lot more based on that. So, it's like pumping the muscles and more resistance, stronger. Well, we know in Pilates, sometimes less is more.
Yep.
So there was that, and when I got off that apparatus, because I had been doing this, we had to work all those different apparatuses and all those different machines and everything like that, and I'd felt it. And for me, it was like, oof, right? As a dancer, it's like, this doesn't really work so well for me. I mean, you can make it work, but when I got off Pilates, because it makes everything work and it connects everything, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This should be everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'll talk about that, but basically, I thought it was like, why isn't this everywhere? This is an amazing.
Well, thank goodness you felt that way.
Well, do I think Pilates will ever be covered? Well, here, I can answer that. Let me just answer that really quick. If it's done by a physical therapist, yes, because Pilates teachers are not medical professionals. You can get a Pilates certification in a weekend, or you can stay in 1,000 hours. To be a physical therapist, it's 4 years of college and 3 years of graduate school, and you are licensed by the state. But within that license, there's a lot of restrictions. I know there's some people saying, oh, we should get Pilates teachers licensed, and it's like, that's the last thing you want to do, because one, if you get licensed, whoever's the licensing body dictates what Pilates is, which is, what they try to, the whole reason for fighting me for the trademark was to stop me from saying what Pilates was. But now if they get licensed, these people say they want to get licensed, they're basically going to be able to do the same thing. And two, you're going to be very restricted and limited. Right now, as a Pilates teacher, you can't do hands-on, but exercise-wise, you can do, we know, Pilates isn't necessarily what Joe taught. You can teach anything and everything. If you get licensed, it's going to be very restrictive. So there's benefits and drawbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. So Mary, when it comes to that, as far as insurance, maybe at some point if they get licensure, but it's also in the U.S. Other countries different, but in the U.S. it's by state. These are state laws. So you're going to have to get 50 states to license Pilates instructors, and that it took almost 100 years for 50 states to license and connect and get together with physical therapists. So that's not going to probably happen in our lifetime.
Mm.
Maybe,
Okay.
but I doubt it.
Okay.
What you sort of just said about after your first time doing Pilates, your experience when you thought like, wow, I would, if I ever have a chance, I want to try to take this like everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is actually leading to our next topic tomorrow. So that's a perfect way to end today on that note. So just like you, after you finished your first lesson, you thought, wow, if I ever get a chance, I want to try to take Pilates around the world or everywhere.
Well, what I said to myself was like, this is amazing. Why isn't it everywhere? And then I said to myself, if I ever get the chance, I'm going to try to take it. And I did get the chance.
Cool.
And
And that's what we'll talk about tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Cathy.
Thanks, Cathy.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Sean, and our viewers.
Yeah, thank you so much for everybody for joining in. So tomorrow we're going to be here at 7 p.m. and we're going to have our next conversation with Sean about when he did purchase the original business and the archives, and he'll tell us all about that experience and how that all took place.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and I look forward to telling the other side of the story and let everybody know the real history, the real Pilates history that's happened, with his business and his archives and everything else going forward. So
Yeah.
thank you.
I think 29 days will do it.
Yep.
Yeah, but you know what? We had to really fit it in there because there was just so
I know.
much to talk about. So we really packed it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.